For more than a decade, I have often opened stories with a familiar warning, saying that what follows is among the most unsettling mysteries I have ever explored. And the truth is simple. The longer you stare into the depths of the internet, the more darkness begins to stare back at you. There is no bottom to it. An endless pit of excess, cruelty, and things better left unseen. Yet what I am about to describe may genuinely be the most disturbing discovery I have ever come across online. It exists in a category of horror that most people will never encounter, and honestly, never should. This story is not an invitation or a guide to seek out what I will be discussing. The original material is not something anyone should go looking for. Anything referenced here would be heavily obscured if shown at all. Even so, be warned. Simply hearing the details may be too much for some. If you are still here after that disclaimer, then we can move forward. Several months ago, I came across an article published by Vice, written by Ben Ditto, titled, "A Vietnamese Murder Has Given the World Its First Real Snuff Movie." The piece described 3 video clips that surfaced on a shock website in late July 2025. Together, they became known as the Vietnamese Butcher. The most widely shared video in that set, often referred to as the execution, is both horrifying and disturbingly simple. It opens with an overhead view of a man lying on a tarp spread across the floor of a bathroom, engaged in a private act. Beneath his neck rests a solid wooden chopping block. In the background, distant sounds of dogs and passing vehicles can be heard, suggesting this was filmed not in isolation, but in the middle of everyday life. What follows, however, is anything but ordinary. As the man announces that he is close to finishing, a second figure steps into frame from just out of view. He raises a heavy cleaver and, with several violent strikes, removes the man's head. The act is captured directly and at close range. Blood splashes across the room. The body jerks, then falls still. Without hesitation, the killer begins working, dragging the severed head out of frame and cutting into the body with practiced precision, the kind that implies experience. Breathing hard, he slices from the neck straight down to the lower abdomen, then opens the cut sideways. The video spread rapidly, largely because of how deeply it affected those who watched it. Even viewers accustomed to scenes of death and brutality felt that this was different. It appeared organized, deliberate, almost clinical. The room was well lit. The framing felt uncomfortably close. And as would later be revealed, the most critical moments had been captured from multiple camera angles positioned around the room. The second video, recorded immediately afterward, became known as the butchering. It shows the body being taken apart, piece by piece. Limbs are separated and laid out. Organs are rinsed in a sink. Human flesh is placed into pots and onto plates using chopsticks. Some body parts are forced back into the victim's mouth. Yet of the 3 clips released that July, the most revealing may actually be the first. Often called the rehearsal, it was filmed in a different location, an office-like setting. In it, the victim kneels and rests his head on a chopping block, while another figure dressed in what appears to be Adidas sportswear and wearing a Guy Fawkes mask brings a cleaver down toward his neck, demonstrating exactly how the fatal blow would later be delivered. Near the end of the rehearsal clip, the man on his knees asks for the cameras to be switched off. The masked figure, the one who will later become his executioner, offers words of comfort. Both men rise to their feet, and the footage cuts to black. What these additional videos make unmistakably clear is that the victim was not only aware he was being filmed, but had willingly agreed to his own death, fully understanding it would end in cannibalism. Those who dug deeper soon realized that the 3 Vietnamese butcher videos were only a small fragment of something far larger. They belonged to a bundle containing 11 recordings and 98 photographs, openly advertised for sale on Telegram, an encrypted platform favored by criminals because of how difficult it is to trace transactions. Partial access to this package reportedly cost around $100 United States, while full access demanded closer to $600. According to multiple sources, the material had been circulating through black market channels since February, roughly 5 months before any portion of it appeared publicly. Not all of it has surfaced, but what has is more than enough to unsettle even those long desensitized to extreme content. In one leaked set of images, the victim's heart, kidneys, and other organs are shown cooked in a herbal stew alongside red dates and goji berries. Other body parts appear to have been prepared as a curry-like dish. In another sequence of photos, the executioner poses in front of a mirror, holding the victim's freshly severed head. Some claim there is also a video in which the killer boils the head in a pot. If such footage exists, it has yet to emerge on the open web. Over the years, countless videos depicting death have circulated online, but the Vietnamese butcher struck the internet with overwhelming force. Vice went so far as to label the execution footage the first confirmed snuff video. According to their article, snuff is defined as a murder filmed specifically for commercial distribution. It is not merely raw footage of real killings, and it is not a compilation of recycled gore clips. To qualify, the act must be produced with the intention of making money, not for pleasure, not to shock, but for profit. That definition can be argued endlessly. What truly matters is that criminologists have long maintained that no murder films, online or otherwise, have ever been created primarily to generate income. At least, that was the consensus. Perhaps until now. After reading the Vice article, I initially thought this case would make for a compelling segment in a collection of disturbing discoveries from the internet. But as I searched, I found no other coverage in English. I waited for further details to emerge, but none ever did. Gradually, the case slipped from my thoughts. That changed last week, when I was contacted by someone I will refer to only as X. They urged me to revisit this story, claiming that major new developments had recently come to light. X pointed me toward a massive dossier spanning 106 pages, compiled by a group known as the OENT and Cyber Investigation Vietnam Community on Facebook. For their own protection, members operated anonymously, using burner accounts while quietly running an independent investigation. Their goal was simple in theory, but daunting in practice. Analyze the footage, gather open-source evidence, identify the victim, and expose the person responsible. This is the story of how they did it. The group, which I will refer to as OSENT, began with the basics. They searched online to see how much information about the Vietnamese butcher already existed. The answer was almost none. Despite the victim's face being clearly visible in the footage, no relatives had come forward, assuming he had any, and there was no public sign that law enforcement was actively investigating the case. Still, the nature of the crime itself offered a starting point. Cases like this are extremely rare. Up to that moment, only 2 documented incidents existed in which one person willingly allowed themselves to be killed and consumed by another. Both had taken place in Germany. The first was the infamous case of Armin Maives, who killed and partially consumed a consenting volunteer named Bernd Brandes. The second involved a police officer named Detlev Gröning, who murdered a Polish businessman, Wojciech Stempien. While no definitive proof ever emerged that Gröning consumed his victim, their private chat logs strongly suggested that he did. In both cases, the individuals involved had met through online cannibalism forums, Cannibal Cafe, and Zambian Meat. Based on that pattern, OSENT investigators reasoned that the same dynamic likely applied here. Both the victim and the killer spoke with unmistakable Vietnamese accents. The unofficial name given to the footage seemed accurate. With that in mind, the group began combing through Vietnamese online communities devoted to so-called long pork. It did not take long for them to identify the victim. He was a man in his mid-30s named Nguyen Xuan Dat. Very little was known about Dat as a person. He lived an intensely private life and appeared to have few close connections in the physical world. Online, however, he was deeply embedded in highly active and deeply illicit circles. Since around 2019, Dat had been an active user of Motherless, an explicit file-sharing platform accessible only through a VPN and known for catering to extreme and deviant interests. Across that site and several other fringe forums, he used variations of a username centered on beheading. His posts, both on Facebook and on these niche platforms, revolved obsessively around decapitation and cannibalism, not directed at others, but at himself. In one leaked message, believed to have been written by Dat, he explained his reasoning, saying, quote, Not only am I ugly, but I am also full of diseases. I cannot live freely like normal people. I have relied on my parents my entire life. What other choice do I have? I am truly trapped by my own fate. Disillusioned with his existence, Dat appeared to withdraw completely from society and devote what remained of his life to his most extreme and unsettling desire. Online, he openly discussed what he called his final fantasy: to be killed at the peak of pleasure by a female executioner and then consumed afterward. This kind of fixation did not stand out in the digital spaces he inhabited. On one forum dedicated to Japanese manga, an Edoguro story titled "Applicant for Death" was translated into Vietnamese at the explicit request of a user known as Mr. Beheading. The story centers on a man who, while lying in bed with two women, is decapitated by a katana. Even after his head is severed, the narrative continues from its perspective, describing the overwhelming sensations that follow. To those reviewing Dat's online history, this manga appeared less like disturbing fiction he enjoyed and more like a detailed template for a future he hoped to experience himself. For years, Dat persistently searched for someone willing to fulfill this fantasy. Along the way, he gathered a small online circle of individuals who shared similarly extreme and abnormal psychological inclinations. His search for a female executioner ultimately failed. Later, members of Osent uncovered an account on a gay forum believed to belong to Dat. In one post, he had publicly shared his mobile phone number. That number was traced to a Zalo account, which listed his date of birth as March 10, 1989. By cross-referencing these details, online investigators located a man matching Dat's name and birth date in a village registry from Tai Bin province. When two users contacted the village head directly, he confirmed that a man by that name had once lived there but left after his father died. Dat's mother, believed to be his only living relative, reportedly struggled with mental health issues and had lost contact with her son years earlier. This explained why no one came forward to identify him when the videos first appeared. At the same time, other investigators reached out to the few contacts listed on Dat's Facebook profile, hoping someone might respond with useful information. One individual, using the alias Flea, replied. Flea described themselves as a fellow decapitation fantasist. They claimed to have met Dat briefly in person and said that he worked as a fishmonger at Phun Hoang Market in Hanoi. Most importantly, Flea claimed to know who had killed Dat. According to them, it was a man both of them had interacted with across several forums, someone deeply embedded in their disturbing online circle. His name was Chung. Flea and others said that Dat had been communicating with Chung for a long time, but had grown increasingly frustrated because Chung refused to commit to a definite execution date. Eventually, Chung agreed. He settled on a specific time and location. In a screenshot later provided by VLE, Dat's account sent a private message to one of his contacts shortly after the killing. The message was short and chilling. It read, "Dat has been beheaded." This suggested that Chung did not merely have access to Dat's social media accounts, but was actively using them to communicate with a small inner circle of like-minded individuals. Some investigators believe this may have been an attempt to lure potential future victims. In an effort to confirm Chung's involvement, Osent investigators continued reaching out to Dat's online contacts, including people he had met through a homosexual group centered around beheading fantasies. One member, using the name Hua Choi, replied and went even further, openly claiming to be the killer seen in the videos. The confession was brief. Soon after making it, Hua Choi stopped responding entirely. Further digging uncovered message exchanges between Hua Choi and several individuals, including Dat, in which Hua Choi appeared to offer his services as a killer. Within the Osent community, this left three possible explanations. Hua Choi could have been role-playing, inserting himself into the case for attention. Hua Choi could have been an alias used by the real executioner Chung. Or, more disturbingly, Hua Choi might have been another victim whose account Chung had taken control of. After thoroughly reviewing Dat's Facebook activity, forum posts, and private communications, the community assembled a timeline of events. It unfolded like this. On January 25, 2025, Dat posted a deeply alarming status update on Facebook. It read, 3 hours left until the execution. That same day, all of his known forum accounts showed their final activity. This date is widely believed to be when the Vietnamese butcher videos were recorded and when Dat's life came to an end. 1 month later, on February 25, 2025, a message was sent from Dat's account to one of his contacts, stating that Dat was dead. Investigators believe this message was written by the executioner himself. That same month, the Vietnamese butcher videos and photographs began circulating for sale on the black market. On June 10, 2025, Dat's Facebook account posted what would become its final update. The message read, "From today, I am logging out of this account for good." To investigators, this was yet another sign that someone else had been controlling his profile. After that post, the page remained active. But when the Vietnamese butcher videos surfaced publicly in July and traffic to the account surged, it was manually taken down. Proving this timeline with absolute certainty would require tools available only to law enforcement. Still, for those piecing together the evidence, the sequence of events formed a disturbingly consistent narrative. The investigators had identified the victim and had nearly confirmed the exact time and date of his death. Yet, one critical question remained unanswered. Who was the masked man in the footage? The figure known only as Chung. Some observers naively argued that he had committed no crime, since Dat had willingly offered his life. But in no country on earth is it legal to kill another person simply because they consent to it. Euthanasia is the lone exception, and even then it is tightly regulated. It applies only to patients who meet strict criteria and is carried out by licensed medical professionals under rigid legal oversight. Anything outside of those boundaries is homicide. Whoever Chung truly was, he was unquestionably guilty of murder, and the implications were far more disturbing. How many times had this man preyed on vulnerable individuals to fulfill his own twisted fantasies? How many more might he target in the future? Identifying and exposing him became an urgent priority. Fortunately, investigators had something tangible to work with. In one photograph, Chung appeared reflected in a mirror, holding Dat's severed head. Enough of his appearance was visible to extract key details. He had a stocky build, a receding or thinning hairline, a visible scar above one eyebrow, monolid eyes, and a green mask that some speculated could be military in origin. Most notably, he bore a distinctive birthmark pattern on his arm and under his armpit, along with a tattoo that read, Dat139. Searching for further clues, OSCENT members began closely analyzing the environment shown in the videos. In the butchering footage, the killer moves through what appears to be a compact kitchen. The floor is tiled in blue and white patterns. Red baseboards line the walls. A green door stands nearby. Red tiles surround the counter, topped with a white countertop. At one point, a bottle of Lavi water can be seen on a table, along with a yellow bottle of Chinese brand dishwashing liquid near the sink. Several users noted that the decor, utensils, and cleaning products closely matched items commonly found and sold in Vietnam's northern border provinces, helping to narrow the geographic focus. Frustratingly, that was where progress stalled. By late August, the investigation began to lose momentum. Weeks turned into months without any new breakthroughs. It appeared that the Vietnamese butcher case was destined to fade into the long list of internet mysteries that never receive closure. Then, just last month, everything changed. The story erupted once again. In the third week of November, 2025, an anonymous Facebook user came forward. This individual, whom investigators would refer to as the whistleblower, or simply WB, claimed to have been in direct contact with both Dat and the executioner. WB shared newly surfaced screenshots of their final conversations with Dat, messages they received on January 25, 2025. One message, sent at 2:40 in the afternoon, stated that the execution would take place in roughly 3 hours. That placed Dat's time of death somewhere between 5:30 and 6 in the evening. The message also mentioned that Dat had already shared WB's contact details with the executioner, implying that WB had at one point considered offering themselves as the next victim. At some point after that exchange, WB clearly changed their mind. Rather than walking toward the executioner, they stepped forward to assist the investigation. WB stated that they wanted Dat's killer held accountable, regardless of the fact that Dat had consented to his fate. Most importantly, WB released their private chat history with the suspected killer, a man using the name Kam-Than Chung on Facebook. In those messages, Chung made a chilling statement, saying, quote, "Dat's bones have already become fertilizer." He then invited the whistleblower to meet in person to discuss WB's own beheading. Chung proposed a specific meeting location, an address on a street in Hulu Town, Lang Son Province. The pinned location appeared to be just outside a government tax office. For the first time, the search for Chung had something concrete, a full name, and a physical location. At this point, a content creator known online as The Curious One entered the picture. He had been documenting the case for some time, producing three-dimensional reconstructions of the crime scenes. With a name and an address now available, he began cross-referencing the community ES findings against public social media profiles and announced that he believed he had identified the killer. Before he could release any specific details, however, he claimed to have received a serious threat. In a post, he wrote, "The forces behind this are too powerful enough to swallow our entire team." He stated that the investigation would end there, but added that if anything were to happen to him, all of his findings would be made public. Alongside that message, he shared a partial image of the suspect S face and a blurred screenshot of one of the suspect S usernames. It did not take long for members of the online investigation community to uncover the obscured name. It read, Tanch 111. From that moment on, the connections began to surface. Variations of the name Than Chung, including Than Chung 51, started appearing across multiple platforms: anonymous forums, Instagram, TikTok. Crucially, many of these accounts were connected to a Twitter profile known as Duan LS. That account, in turn, led investigators to a Facebook profile belonging to Duan Van Sang. On the surface, Sang appeared to be an ordinary man, a married father of two, in his late 50s, living in Langsun near the Chinese border. Sang was a retired deputy head of a market management department team and also served as the head of the Duan family in Langsun City, a powerful clan numbering in the thousands. His public images painted the picture of a man living comfortably. He had held a senior bureaucratic position, enjoyed considerable respect within his community, and maintained strong ties to government institutions, not only through his own career, but also through his wife and sons. Naturally, a question emerged. Could this man really be the Chung investigators had been hunting for? As it turned out, Sang's eldest son was named Than Chung. Even more unsettling, that son's birthday fell on the 13th of September, Dat 139. A coincidence that was difficult to dismiss. The clothing his son had been photographed wearing also appeared to match the outfit worn by the masked figure in the rehearsal footage. Some speculated that this meant Sang's son was directly involved. However, the physical characteristics of the masked executioner told a different story. The individual in the footage had a receding hairline and a body shape that aligned far more closely with Sang himself. Perhaps he had borrowed his son's sportswear. Perhaps they owned similar clothing. Either way, private messages sent from the Kam-Than Chung account included photographs that strongly suggested the person behind the profile was Sang, using his own child's name as a digital shield. While some believe Sang may not have acted alone, there is no evidence at this time that his son played any role in the crime. Investigators then began combing through Sang's older photographs, including images from a second Facebook account he had largely abandoned and failed to secure. Side-by-side comparisons quickly revealed something unsettling. Sang had a circular birthmark on his shin, closely matching a mark visible on the executioner's leg. He also bore a prominent birthmark on his right bicep and near his armpit, strikingly similar to what appeared in the butcher footage. Scars and facial marks aligned. The tattoo placement matched. His hairline and facial structure were eerily consistent with the masked man. One photograph of the exterior of Sang's home revealed another quiet detail. A pair of flip-flops identical to those worn by the killer in the execution video. Digging further, users uncovered a TikTok video Sang had recorded inside a market management department building known as Team Number 3. The background of the office was an exact match to the setting seen in the rehearsal clip. The same plastic plants, the same blue fan blades, the same crooked cabinets. Others uncovered a news article containing a photograph taken at the Department's former Team Number 4 location, where Sang once served as second in command. In the image, Sang is seen inspecting confiscated goods while standing in front of what appears to be the very same kitchen shown in the butchering footage. The green doors, the red tile trim, the blue patterned floor, the red wall tiles, the white countertop. Every detail lined up. At the time, the exact location of the execution itself had been harder to pin down. The footage was filmed in a plain, unremarkable bathroom. Still, it makes little sense that a killer would transport a body elsewhere just to carry out the butchering. Applying basic logic, investigators concluded that the execution most likely took place in the same building where the dismemberment occurred. Later, images leaked from inside the bathroom at Team Number 4. It has since earned an infamous nickname online, the most miserable toilet in the world, and yes, it looked disturbingly familiar. Sang officially retired in 2025, but he was still actively working for the market management department at the time of Dat's death. This raised an obvious question. Why would a government employee commit such a crime inside his own workplace? On the surface, it seems reckless, but there was a cold logic behind the decision. The suspected date of the execution, January 25th, marked the beginning of the Tet holiday, when Vietnam celebrates the Lunar New Year. Government offices would have been completely empty. Beyond that, a market management department building would naturally contain a kitchen, cooking equipment, and even an incinerator used to destroy confiscated goods. According to reports, Sang volunteered to remain at the office for 5 days during the holiday period, while all other staff were away. As the online investigation intensified, Sang found himself at the center of a growing digital storm. For months, he had quietly been a member of online communities discussing the case, including the OSINT Facebook group. He monitored the investigation, read through the threads, and even commented on updates, likely taking a twisted satisfaction in watching others search for him without realizing he was already there. At one point, he reacted with laughing emojis when users expressed frustration over the lack of progress. But after he was exposed, his tone shifted dramatically. Sang began posting a series of erratic and aggressive messages directly on the group's timeline. "I am the executioner. Who can catch me?" he wrote. "You are the real executioners, because you want people to die so you can celebrate. Is that not true? I have lived 60 years in this world. I am no longer afraid of death. Anyone who wants to meet me is welcome at my house. Those who exposed me, show yourselves." To some observers, these messages looked like the desperate unraveling of a guilty man who realized the internet had finally caught up with him. To others, they appeared to be the panicked outbursts of someone who believed he was being falsely accused on a massive scale. In another bizarre move, Sang posted, and later deleted, a photograph of his lunch with a caption that read, "Come on, it's just a few pieces of human meat." It may have been meant as dark humor or provocation. Regardless, the image was quickly censored by others, just in case. At this stage, the evidence was already substantial, and digital forensics added even more weight. Several users attempted to reset the passwords for 2 of Sang's email accounts. Both attempts triggered 2-factor authentication linked to the same device, an Oppo Reno 25G. Even more telling, password reset requests for an email address associated with DAT's phone number were also traced back to that exact same device. Another coincidence added to OSINT's rapidly growing list. As investigators examined the digital footprint tied to Sang's various online aliases, a deeply disturbing pattern began to emerge. Early on, the man behind those accounts appeared to use social media for casual encounters and flirtations on gay forums. Over the span of roughly 2 decades, that behavior gradually evolved into something far darker. He adopted a dominant persona, one centered on control, humiliation, and the suffering of others. Eventually, this escalated into an obsession with cutting and cannibalism. In 2022, Sang uploaded photographs of a dismembered body to an online forum, claiming he wanted to shock and harden the other members. The images were later deleted, and their original source remains unknown. Additional screenshots showed him attempting to acquire severed pieces of male anatomy from contacts in southern Vietnam. These parts were believed to come either from gender reassignment surgeries or from individuals willing to sell body parts for money. To the Vietnamese online community, the accumulation of evidence against Sang had become overwhelming. The matching body marks, the tattoo, the kitchen, the office locations, the shared devices, the addresses, the usernames, the long and disturbing post history. Together, it all pointed to a single conclusion. Sang was the primary suspect. At that point, only one thing remained. The authorities needed to formally step in and confirm these findings using official forensic methods, both digital and physical. But despite being made aware of the Vietnamese butcher videos, law enforcement remained inactive for months. Comments left on the Lang Son police social media pages, urging them to investigate, were reportedly deleted. Some accused the police of negligence. Others believed they were attempting to preserve Vietnam's image as a safe country. Still others suspected corruption. Given Sang's status and his political connections, many feared he was using his influence to suppress the investigation. With his name now circulating widely, there was also concern that he might retaliate against individual members of the OSENT community. For their own safety, most participants continued their work anonymously. After months of gathering digital evidence and raising awareness, the OSENT community, which had grown to more than 20,000 members, compiled their findings into a 106-page document. They even translated the entire report into English, ensuring it could reach as wide an audience as possible. The document spread rapidly. Within days, the Facebook group surged in size, and the evidence they presented became impossible to dismiss. On November 28, 2025, authorities quietly announced that Sang had been arrested and that the suspected crime scene had been sealed for forensic examination. According to translated sections of the police report, investigators discovered 3 teeth believed to be human beneath the kitchen sink. Numerous bone fragments were also found inside the restroom's septic tank, within the kitchen drainage cavity, and in a water channel located behind the building. Forensic testing on these remains is still ongoing. The report further states that a search of Sang's home was conducted. During that search, officers seized 2 jackets matching those worn by the perpetrator in the rehearsal footage, along with a space heater identical to one visible in the execution video. Investigators also recovered a mobile phone believed to have belonged to Dat. At the time, it was being used by Sang's older sister. When questioned, she stated that Sang had given her the phone himself. Following his arrest, Sang confessed to being responsible for the Vietnamese butcher. His official statement, as it currently stands, reads as follows. Around 2020, Sang became acquainted with Dat through social media. After communicating for some time, Dat confided that he was part of an online group operating through a website called Motherless. Dat repeatedly invited Sang to join. Initially, Sang claimed he found the group barbaric and did not dare to participate. Over time, however, Sang continued researching various forms of sexual violence and extreme practices. Eventually, he joined. Dat continued sharing details about his desire to be killed in a specific way. At one point, Dat told Sang he was willing to pay 10 million dong, roughly 380 United States dollars, to rent a location where the act could be carried out. By July of 2024, Sang agreed and expressed his willingness to perform the killing as Dat requested. On January 25, 2025, Sang summoned Dat to the Market Management Department building. When Dat arrived, he brought 2 cleavers for Sang to use. Around dusk, Sang killed Dat exactly as depicted in the videos later circulated online. After the killing, Sang used a knife to cut the body into multiple sections, separating bone, flesh, and internal organs. He placed the remains into a pot and boiled them, claiming this was done to slow decomposition and reduce odor. He then crushed the bones and divided both bone and flesh, into approximately 10 plastic bags, a small portion of which was reportedly fed to dogs. Sang stated that he disposed of the remains across multiple locations, primarily by discarding them into public trash bins. As for the 2 cleavers used in the killing, he claimed that on January 27th, while traveling home from work, he threw them into the container of a handcart parked along the roadside. Many people have taken issue with the way Sang's confession is framed. Critics argue that he portrays himself as a passive participant, someone who was manipulated or psychologically coerced by Dat into following instructions. But that narrative collapses under scrutiny. There is extensive evidence showing that Sang had been immersed in deeply depraved online spaces for decades. His post history includes repeated discussions about wanting to kill and consume people. Even more damning, just 2 weeks after killing Dat, he was actively attempting to recruit the whistleblower as his next victim. This is still a developing case, and new information continues to emerge. Even so, largely due to the efforts of the OSINT Facebook community, Sang will stand trial for Dat's killing. Depending on how the case unfolds, he could face the death penalty. Yet, this may not be where the story ends. With more facts now available, it has become clear that this case does not meet Vice's definition of snuff. The videos were filmed primarily to satisfy Sang's own twisted desires. Any financial gain appears to have been secondary, but that raises a far more unsettling question. What if Sang was not the one selling the footage? As noted earlier, before the videos appeared on shock websites, the Vietnamese butcher content was being distributed by unknown Chinese-speaking individuals through encrypted messaging platforms. At present, it remains unclear whether those distributors were Sang himself, people he shared the material with online, or more disturbingly, dark web associates who may have assisted in producing and spreading the videos. This uncertainty has fueled a darker theory, that Sang was not acting alone, but was part of a wider underground market dealing in real executions across East and Southeast Asia. Similar cases have already begun surfacing on a Chinese platform known as Bu Taiba, including one involving a woman selling genuine footage of dismembered Asian men. As uncovered in a Vice investigation, one message from a Chinese distributor advertised his material in blunt terms. The price is 89 yuan to join the regular group, 198 yuan for the large group. It is a stable group that has existed for 4 or 5 years, with tens of thousands of users. Corpse disposal, body dismemberment, executions. Necrophilia is in the Ice Love group. If you want clean bodies only, that is called forensics. And that may be the most disturbing realization of all, that the Vietnamese butcher might be only one fragment of a much larger and far darker puzzle, that there may be many more videos like this one, still being bought and sold in the shadows, never leaked to the public. Content traded by people willing to kill because they are asked to, or in some cases, simply because they believe they can get away with it. People who traffic human organs as exotic meat, people who sell them for transplantation. There is clearly a market for it. Whether the full scale of that market will ever be exposed remains to be seen. What is undeniable, however, is that this case has shaken Vietnam to its core. And while official responses have remained largely muted, the only real power ordinary people possess is the ability to keep the story alive, so it is not buried beneath the next cycle of headlines. I need to be clear about one thing. Do not go looking for any of the material discussed here. It is psychologically harmful, and depending on where you live, even attempting to view it could be illegal. This story exists not to shock for the sake of shock, but as a warning about what happens in the darkest corners of the internet, about how easily vulnerable people can be exploited, and about how real the consequences become when fantasy is allowed to cross into reality. If this story affected you, if it made you think, or if it left you unsettled, make sure you stay engaged. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your voice keeps stories like this from being forgotten.